All right, thank you for the three of you who jumped in, and potentially Ashley. It sounds like might join as well. Heather, I was just mentioning to Lisa and Leela that um, I've got a few things I can cover, and was going to show some of the data from the survey, and then answer questions. I know we had mentioned about potentially chatting separate, but we can probably set up another time to do that, or potentially after this. We'll just see how things go. And again, this will I'll after I show the few things I have, I'll sort of turn it over to you, you three, if you have any specific questions or other pieces to dig into. I know we have a lot of people in a lot of different places, so for better or worse, we'll see what we can do to sort of unify a lot of those questions and make it applicable to everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share this real quick. Just a quick peek. I don't know, this may or may not be useful, but I figured since I compiled it and have it as a visual, we might as well at least peek at it as a group real quick. This is some of just the quantitative feedback that came back from the survey that everybody took. The few things that sort of stood out to me, again, this course really is covering a lot of range, and I know there's a lot of people in a lot of different places, so that's sort of reflective in a lot of this feedback. The second one, there are still a high percentage of folks that I think either it took a while to really get a feel for the course or are still not comfortable in the course. I'm okay taking on some of that and saying I think this abbreviated 8-week semester has just been a challenge all around, both for you all and for me. So it doesn't surprise me, but I'm glad folks were honest in saying, this is still a challenging, uncomfortable sort of situation in a lot of ways. Is this too small, or are you guys able to see some of this okay? Seeing it? Okay. I'm going to try to be a little heavier on some announcements going from here forward. I know we're kind of coming towards some of the end, but folks seem to find those useful. So I'm gonna try to keep announcements coming and keep posting relevant dates out, as it seems those are useful. Clarification on things is sort of across the board. That doesn't surprise me too much. I know some of the expectations. I think we've got a mix of those that are really sort of just going at these projects from the descriptions in the assignments themselves and not worrying so much about the rubric. And there's others that are kind of glancing at the assignment and then really digging in and allowing their projects to evolve based on the requirements of the rubric itself. I don't want to say that one is right over the other. The one thing I've mentioned to a few folks is don't let the rubric dictate what you feel is going to be valuable in your specific project and solution. I honestly am going to try to be as generous as possible in grading, knowing that you have absorbed what it is that assignment is really meant to represent, and not be, the rubric is meant to provide feedback in a useful way that really connects to what the intention of the assignment is. But I guess, yeah, I would push folks to not let that be the determiner of how these projects sort of are ultimately crafted. I know that might be frustrating because we're already through a bulk of the major assignments, but that's my thought there. That's about it. Again, the sort of what folks are finding valuable. There's a pretty broad range again. The modules, some of the feedback and discussions. This latest discussion, for those that haven't jumped in, it's always one of my favorite ones, talking about just sort of ethics and data and how we can evaluate in an ethical manner. So already that gets wheels turning for good reason. I mean, there's a lot to dissect when we talk about data and ethics, and just how to sort of work through evaluation in a project like this, while still staying true to the ethics and being respectful of our learners, knowing that they're humans on the other end of a lot of these things. So just wanted to give a quick peek at that. And happy to, if anybody wants to really peek at that in more detail, I'm happy to share it out. So just let me know. The few other pieces I'll note, let me see if my drive wasn't behaving here. If it does, I'll pull up my other notes. Any other questions about any of that while I pull this up from those that are here? You guys just get to jam to the 80s here in the meantime. Let's see. There it is. So I really just have a couple points that I had pulled out of some of what has come from both the submissions of our design documents and also the sort of latest components that have either been updated. Some folks have sort of reworked some previous components and built it back in, and then the storyboards as well. There was a fair amount of range in those storyboards, and I'm hoping to work through with some folks, those that still feel like it's, you know, been an assignment that hasn't quite fit with their project, or they're not seeing the connection of why it's really valuable. So happy to kind of keep working through that. The few things I'll mention, and this may or may not, and forgive me, I have a lot of projects running through my head with the course, but so this may or may not apply to those that are here, but I think it will to some that watch this after. There are a number of solutions that are reliant on instructors or some sort of expert that is sort of a key component of their solution, which is okay, but I came back in a number of ways, either on the design documents or the storyboards, in saying, let's be sure we value what we're bringing and our contributions as designers of the instruction, and don't rely on, you know, oh, I know I need an extra piece of instruction here, so I'll just write in that there will be an expert or an instructor that kind of fills that gap. I don't know, does that apply to any of you three, that you're like leveraging a big piece of your design is to say, sort of this big chunk will just be taken on by an expert or an instructor of some sort? Okay. Okay. Yeah, that piece is really just to say, let's make, you know, I want everyone to value what we're bringing to these. Like, yeah, it's a give and take. Experts are as critical as designers in a lot of ways, and it has to be collaborative. But yeah, I want to see that balance, I guess. So just something to keep in mind, because I did see a number that were reliant on that. The other piece, those that sort of got the main piece of feedback from the storyboards was sort of a heavy reliance on text and like explanatory text and dialogue around how things are going to run, as opposed to also emphasizing like the visual, really playful side of what a storyboard can be. And I think for those that may have lost a few points here and there on the storyboard, it was typically due to not sort of allowing the visual of this experience to come forward. And that's the key behind the storyboard, is to, you know, both have like descriptive instruction, but also a visual representation of how these are going to flow. Questions on that piece of it? And again, I apologize because I don't know what comments were sort of tied to what solution. I know, Heather, there was a piece of that with yours and Jen's, but questions or any discussion you guys want to have around that sort of idea of just what the storyboard represents, and look at that towards the evaluation plan as well. This is a silent trio. You guys got to help me out. There's only 4 of us.
I have a question, but I was just waiting until you opened it for questions.
Got it. You're like, that's not pertinent to what I'm after, so keep moving.
Sorry.
Nope, that's fine. I think those were the 2 key points. I pulled a few other broader themes out of the feedback that I can go over real quick, and then we can jump into questions. The 8-week version has been challenging in good and bad ways to a number of people. That came back very clear in some of the feedback. I wouldn't say it was one or the other. It was just like, this is tough, it's different. Some really are enjoying that push, some are not. And that was a reality that came out in some of that. The additional unit and allowing folks to work ahead, that was unanimously helpful. So that has been really great feedback, because now this course, as it's used in this abbreviated version moving forward, I think we'll always look at designing in that way to allow for folks to at least move a full unit ahead as they would like to. Being more explicit about the connection between any of the texts and resources and the quizzes, that definitely came through. So that will influence, I think, just some of the, again, some of this is moving forward. And so I apologize because it's not as helpful now that you've been through a lot of it, but that's, this is, as with the instruction that you're building, this course is sort of this evolving, it's an evolving process in itself. So that was a big piece that came out. And then a fair amount back about just due dates sort of being stressful, and there was 4 or 5 comments on the due dates and the staggering, especially within the peer feedback, of sort of having multiple days in a row where things were sort of required. And I found that interesting because there actually has not been many late submissions, and the few that there have been, folks have let me know that they just weren't going to be able to get to it. And so anyone watching, if any of these due dates moving forward is still either stressful or feeling like they're not balanced well, I still welcome that feedback. But know that for the most part, actually, there's this course, having been taught a few times, I'd say even in the 8-week version, there has been much fewer either missed or late submissions. So you guys as a crew have been on top of it. I don't know what to attribute that to, but yeah, everything's been coming in on time. So that's it for me. Let's open it up. Any other just totally open-ended, either course related or not, we can go any direction for the next 15 or so, and then I think we can keep this pretty short.
I'll go, if that's okay.
Yep.
For the project, the last week, the project that's due the last week, I was just curious if you could go over some of the formats that people have used other than website and screencasting, or if those are just the 2 main ones.
For the sort of final display, the display of work project, let me think if there has been some audio-based, like heavily reliant on more of a podcast form with some visual overlays. But then, yeah, screencast has been big. This course typically is always in partnerships. And so that's worked better for folks that are in groups, just to share narration over the top of just looking at different pieces. Some creative video, and then, yeah, some have gone all the way to the point of doing full-on sort of websites with a lot of these elements. This abbreviated semester, I take it as far as you'd like, but I don't overdo it on this assignment. I mean, it's 30 points, and it's really meant to just be sort of a final creative push of, this is sort of where we're at, and our final chance to push it out in a creative way to sort of summarize what this broader document really looks like. So yeah, I've seen interesting combinations of audio, video, in written, with these sort of just screencasts, with narration being by far I'd say 70-80% of them have typically taken that form.
Okay.
But if you feel like you're kind of going out on a limb with something and you want to try something, just let me know. But I'm totally open to whatever format you think is going to make sense.
Okay.
And I'll mention to the others here and anyone who watches, I shared that the individual rubric criteria with Leela on that final assignment, just to get a sense of where it's at. And anyone that wants to get down to that point and get a better sense for what that final project looks like, I'm happy to share those out with anybody. So just let me know that you're already at that point. I don't want to share them out with everybody, in that I think that will be an added sort of stress on folks that may not already be looking at that. But if you're interested in seeing what that final project and rubric looks like, I'm happy to share it out. So just ask and it shall be sent your way.
So I have a question. Is there going to be, I'm sorry, I didn't look ahead at the assignments, but is there going to be an opportunity? We're getting a little concerned that we're not including all the feedback in our solution brief. Isn't going to be in a full fluid, because we've been kind of piecemealing it together. So is there an opportunity for us to turn those assignments back in and make sure we're covering the feedback that you provided?
Yeah, there'll be, there's two, there is a sort of final option of just sharing it out and getting final broad thoughts on it as a whole. There's not going to be like a final graded, because I have a pretty good sense of how these are evolving. There's not going to be a final, like, going back through and cross-referencing any comments. I'm sort of leaving it to you, to the things that you know need to get incorporated based on feedback. I think that's sort of happening in most cases along the way, and these are sort of these evolutions of small changes over time. But I would say, if it is the case that you feel like you've made a fair amount of sort of retroactive changes that have then got implemented, send it over and say, can you give it, like, I'm happy to take it on and take a peek and offer those thoughts based on, I do have a pretty good sense for what all these projects are now and what they've, how they've evolved. So I can offer that feedback, but it's not going to be a specific assignment. There will be an option to just allow others to give feedback on. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to, like, post it, and everyone can dip into the ones that either are relevant, or there's some that are working, around the same organization. So allowing them to sort of bounce ideas and take a final peek at how these final projects came together. So
would you prefer that we submit those assignments as they were originally submitted? Like, if we made changes to the storyboard, just submit the storyboard piece, or submit it as a whole? Submit it as a whole. Yep. From here forward, let's assume, really after the evaluation's thought through, we'll just assume that we're really looking at this as a comprehensive, cohesive plan for the entire solution. Okay. Yep. But yeah, and then just, with the caveat of, like, oh, we made pretty significant changes to this one piece, so here it is, but focus in on storyboard, or, whatever that piece might be. If you want, specific focus on one particular section. Okay. But yeah, at this point, really, I would say, in fact, after the evaluation plan, don't assume any modular. This is really a single assignment at this point, or I guess after next week, we'll just sort of assume everybody has one single project that they're really focused on. Does that make sense? Anything else?
I have a non-class related question, but it's related to the program. I don't know if you want me to ask that right now or later.
Yeah, as long as, or Lisa or Heather, do you have anything else course related? Cool. Then yeah, again, these are really meant to be very open and helpful in any way that they can be. So we can go that direction. I'll also plug a couple things like Colt and some things coming, so we can move away from the course if it makes sense. So yeah, go ahead.
This is my third class, and I'm having trouble deciding which track to go with between instructional design and adult learning, and e-learning design and whatever the implementation. And I guess I just didn't know if you could speak to what kind of if there are different, I know that you get all of the ID track in the e-learning track if you do that track. I just didn't know what the key differences are. And like, if you did go the e-learning track, can you still call yourself an instructional designer, or how that works?
And this comes up often, and I will give this group a little hint that the ILT program is actually looking at some pretty significant changes based on some of this sort of feedback. I don't think it'll really affect any of you too significantly. It's sort of longer term. So yes, if you feel like the identity of an ID has really sunk in and that feels right, use that regardless. Like, there's actually a lot of interesting research around instructional designers and identity, because I think it's a field that is difficult to really see how like our personal interests and identity fits into it. So if something feels right from like what you've gained as what that represents, then I'd say just, take on that role regardless of the track. I would say the distinction of the tracks is there's a few ways to look at it. It's, first of all, ages, like what populations do you really enjoy working with? There's a fair amount of sort of K-12 folks that know that they want to go down more of an educational path, and they're going to be working with younger audiences. There's the adult learning track where it's like, no, I really actually like this sort of format where I'm working with adults. And then there's sort of the e-learning and corporate side of things too. Wanting to build out this course, I think sets up, it's meant to be sort of a hybrid to cross all those boundaries, but I think it sets up well for those that are interested in more of a corporate setting and designing solutions across any potential organization or corporate environment. So it's down to what you feel resonates with you, but I'd say those are kind of the key distinguishing factors between the tracks. But keep an eye out, or feel free to reach out to Brent or Joni or whoever. I don't know who you're sort of tied into as far as an advisor, but they would like to hear any of that, knowing that they're working towards how to mold things to make the most sense, since times are changing and these programs should change along with it. So, or send it along to me and I'm happy to move it along to them. But yeah.
And I would recommend, Leela, if you search like jobs that you're interested in, to look at those jobs descriptions. Because if it is at a corporate level, what I'll tell you, my experience is the instructional designer is usually somebody that's working with HR to develop, where the e-learning person is the developer and coding into an LMS or into some kind of format. So that's what I see at the corporate business level. But I think Taylor has good suggestion, is anyone truly is an instructional designer. I mean, if you are planning out something, you're really an instructional designer, or you are part of being, part of a group who's providing the feedback to a group of instructional designers. So I'm not sure that there's a true distinction, but I would say that if you look at the job descriptions and you see e-learning in the job description, which is kind of disappearing in my opinion, but if you see e-learning, they're assuming you like to code, you like to work in the software, someone's going to hand you the design document to do something with it. Where an instructional designer is kind of a project manager, is getting the people together, they're making sure the interactions are there. That's what I personally see, but I think what I'm seeing is you don't see e-learning as much in a distinction as you do instructional designer, but either way, they're going to look at the completion of the program and see your portfolio and say, she's done instructional design. Quite frankly, there's a lot of people out there that say they do instructional design, and I'm not sure they know what it is. That would be my advice. As Heather's laughing, I can see you laughing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for anyone that's really interested, I think it's actually a good, the like crossover between ID and user experience and learner experience design and project manager. it's a really interesting time and a lot of opportunity for those that want to like really dive into defining. There's a lot of weird gray area between those right now, across a number of sectors, some of which are evolving themselves, whether it's, you know, tech and education, or so there's just a lot of it makes it frustrating. It's why there's these identity issues. But it also means if you can carve out a little piece and be like, no, I know like this, who I really am and how I fit into like fitting that specific role, and want to really put work into defining what that looks like, then I think there's a lot of people that are really interested in having that defined in a really explicit way right now. Because it's just foggy. The last like 5 years I've been doing this, it only seems to have gotten foggier.
And quite frankly, it's one of those departments in the corporate world that gets cut fast. So you've got to be able to wear multiple hats and be able to show that you can do all. It would be nice if the university did change it to a more generic name so it didn't have that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Because the tracks aren't truly that theologically different.
Right. Yep. It's a ton of crossover. It's a lot of, you know, reinforcement of certain theoretical as well as practical skills. I mean, yeah, I think you're right on with that. Anything else? And then if not, I'm just thankful. Since these are open-ended and not directed at anything specific, I know that often weeds people out, and they're like, well, I don't know what I'm going to get out of it, but I know there'll be a recording, so I'll just pop in later. And so glad you guys made the time, and this does become valuable for others. So know that it wouldn't happen without you being here. So appreciate it. Yeah, if there's nothing else, we'll keep it to a half hour and say goodnight. And we're sort of coming upon the home stretch here. But if anything's still really murky, or you know, you want a little leg up, as I did with Leela, and sending along some of those rubric criteria, feel free. I'm happy to kind of let folks work to whatever point feels comfortable and pass some of that along. So just let me know.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night. Thanks, everybody.